U.S. President Donald Trump says he's slapped, quote, tremendous sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. The measures come a day after a planned Trump-Putin summit in Budapest was called off, with Washington expressing disappointment at a lack of progress in ceasefire negotiations with Moscow. Russia's oil industry has been a key source of revenue for Moscow and is seen as one of the primary income sources funding Russia's war in Ukraine. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he believes Vladimir Putin does want an end to the war. He said he hopes the sanctions on Russian oil will be temporary.
Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies. And we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled.
TW's Benjamin Alvarez Gruber was at the White House when that happened. He sent us this update.
Increasing pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. That was the main theme of the meeting that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte held with US President Donald Trump here at the White House. A meeting that comes shortly after the US Treasury Department announced fresh sanctions on Moscow on what they call is the lack of serious commitment by the Russian president to end this war. And also in the context of a meeting that was planned but cancelled between Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and his US counterpart Marco Rubio, and shortly after the visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who asked the US president for Tomahawks, for the cruise missiles to strike deep inside Russian territory, something the US president has not committed to deliver yet.
For more on these new U.S. sanctions against Russia, let's bring in Ivana Stradner. She's a research fellow focusing on Russian military strategy at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies think tank. Ivana, what's your reaction to these unexpected sanctions?
I have to admit that for me, those sanctions were expected because President Trump has been trying to talk nicely to Putin for many, many months and giving him a chance to end his brutal war. And President Trump sees now through his games and decided to impose costly sanctions on him, where is actually Russia's center of gravity, which is energy. And this is precisely the cornerstone how Russia has been funding its war. I think it's also extremely important right now for President Trump to impose secondary sanctions to boost these economic measures against Putin. In addition to that, I think it's extremely important to understand that Putin does not want to negotiate in good faith. He is only willing to stop if he stops him. And in addition to sanctions, I believe that it's very important to put Russia on the defensive and the United States to allow Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia to put Putin back on the negotiation table. Make no mistake, Putin is going to try to escalate. As a matter of fact, we just saw the latest brutal attack on Ukraine and Putin testing nuclear weapons. And this is a psychological game that we should not fall for it.
Ivana, you're saying you think that the U.S. needs secondary sanctions already. Well, we've seen the EU has already sanctioned the Russian energy sector several times, but Russia has turned around and sold its oil and gas to other countries. I'm wondering how much these U.S. sanctions really weaken Russia's economy. Do we think that they can actually have an influence on Russia's ability to finance the war, or will the U.S. just be coming back again and again with new sanctions?
I think the way that sanctions work, you put a little bit out there, you offer negotiations, trying to put Putin back on the negotiation table. And this time around, I think President Trump should not wait for a long time for Putin to try to negotiate it and end this war, because make no mistake, Putin does not want to negotiate and end this war on Ukrainian terms. He wants to end this war on his term. And not only that, he's just buying more time to make sure that the West gives up, that the United States gets tired, and then to continue with his quest. So that's precisely why it's extremely important to target Russia's center of gravity, which is the energy sector, and to impose further sanctions that will be boosted also by our European allies.
Russia analyst Ivana Stradner from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies think tank in the U.S. Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you.
Ukrainian officials say Russian attacks on cities across the country have killed at least 6 people and wounded dozens more. A kindergarten in Kharkiv was among the buildings hit. It followed a massive drone and missile attack on Kyiv overnight.
These firefighters are carrying toddlers to safety. Moments after Russian drones hit a kindergarten in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Emergency teams raced to the scene, pulling children from the debris as more Russian drones circled overhead. All the children inside survived.
I don't know how to react to this. Firing at children is probably not a good thing to do, right?
This man says the attack used Shahid drones. Iranian-made exploding drones. Russia has used them repeatedly to hit cities and power grids across Ukraine.
When the explosion went off, I ran out of the car and started calling an ambulance because it struck a kindergarten. There were many children there.
The strikes in Kharkiv were part of a wider wave of Russian attacks, hitting at least 8 Ukrainian cities, including the capital, Kyiv.
My neighbors are in a huge shock. They have lost their daughter-in-law and 2 grandkids. One was 6 months old and one was 11 years old.
The strikes came just hours after US President Donald Trump confirmed that his plan to hold a second summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin was on hold. With talks stalled, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is seeking more support from Europe. And he has praised Trump's suggestion to freeze the conflict on the current front lines.
I mean, peace negotiations, diplomatic way how to stop Putin. That's why we had the long conversation. After our conversation, you saw messages, public messages from Trump. He proposed stay where we stay and begin conversation. I think that was good compromise, but I'm not sure that Putin will support it. And I said it to President.
So far, Russia has rejected the proposal. But Moscow insists preparations for a Trump-Putin summit are still underway. In the meantime, for millions of Ukrainians, the strikes and the fear go on.